All right, my friends. Usually every day I give a class in the speeches of the Rebbe. Lately they've been in Yiddish. We've tried to make it into Varmalchut, but because of the change of the year and the month, now it's a month that has an extra. The year has an extra 4 Shabbases in it. So therefore it doesn't exactly come out. But okay. So usually we have a speech of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, has such amazing wisdom and practical and unique way of looking at the world in such a positive way. It's a shame to miss it. It's a shame to miss. So today things went a little bit wrong, and there were technical difficulties, and whatever. I pressed the wrong buttons. So as a result, there was no class in the speeches of the Rebbe. But I figured, how can we withhold? How can we not learn a little bit, at least, of the wisdom of the Rebbe, because it's so novel and so desperately necessary for the world. Because the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the Moshiach, and the whole idea of the Moshiach is just to educate everybody about how good they are and how wonderful they are in potential, and to bring this out. So let's look. Okay, this week is going to be Lag BaOmer. We already learned the end of the Sikha. We learned about Lag BaOmer, how Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai was above the destruction of the temple, and how it has to be a very happy day, a very happy and a very positive day, and that Rabbi Shimon said he could save the whole world from destruction, and that he did in fact save the world. It says that in his lifetime there was no rainbow. The world didn't need any protection, and because the rainbow is there to remind, so to speak, as a sign from God that there won't be any destruction, even though the people deserve it. But in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's lifetime, as this was like 1,800 years ago, as the world did not need it, because his merit was enough to save the world. And that was this whole purpose, was to bring blessing into the world, right? That's how he brought the money into the world. And it doesn't say that the money, the silver, the golden coins, remember the story? Okay. Now this week's Torah portion, it's not just by accident that it falls on Lag BaOmer, dealing with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because first of all, the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, this is the precursor, what do you want to say, the preparation for the ideas of the Moshiach. Because like we said before, the whole idea of Moshiach is to stress how precious this physical world is, and every detail of life in this physical world is. And to use these spiritual ideas and about the world to come only as a ladder to come to explain that God favors this physical world and the people that are in it more than all the heavens and the earth. But on the other hand, we see that in this world there's a lot of difficulties and suffering and pain and tribulations and disappointments and frustrations and heartbreaks. And one of the main things Mashiach is going to do is to do away with all this. How is it going to be? So here it explains. Ready? Let's go. So we'll do it for another 15 minutes here. The beginning from this week's Torah portion is, if in my statutes you walk. The rabbis say that this is talking about it's not just saying if you do, it's please go in my statutes. God is pleading. Thus says, as the taich from da is nitatanai. It's not that if you go in my statutes, then it's going to be good, and if you don't, then it's not going to be good, which you can also learn it that way. But mainly you can learn that God is pleading with the Jewish people. If you will only walk in my statutes, please. Like in a lot of places, the word im means a condition. If you go in my statutes, then it's going to be good. If not, it says if you don't listen to me, then im. But here, the main meaning of im, if, means God is pleading, if you will only go on my statutes, please. The Eibishter God, so to speak, he requests from the Jews that they should walk in the statutes of God, that they should learn the Torah and do in his commandments. Learn the commandment, learn the Torah. On the Bakasha and the question, on the Tzivu and the commandment, when God requests it, so this also gives us power to do it. I know you can do it. You can do it. And it is also a promise. You will do it. You will go in my statutes. I'm sure of it. As yet they're written that every single Jew will walk in the statutes of God. Like it says, it says that no Jew will be lost. Every Jew will come to his senses and do all the commandments. The tzvei in these two things, a commandment and a promise, we find in other places where, like for instance, loving God. It's a commandment in the Torah to love God. Now, how can you love God? I mean, it's like commanding somebody to love steak. So some people don't like steaks. Some people love steaks, where you put a steak in front of a person, he goes crazy on a nice steak. Other people, they could care less about a steak. They don't like to eat steaks. I personally do not like to eat steaks. Personally, I don't. If you say, if you eat the steak, I'll give you $1,000. Okay, I'll get it. There's a kosher steak. I'll eat the steak. How can you command someone to love steak? You can command a person to pretend. The same thing, you can't command a person to love. Well, then how can the Torah command us to love God? It's a commandment to love God. If a pasuk says that you must love God, Taich the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, says two meanings. Number one, du sollst lieb haben, you must have love, und you will have love of God. When euch darten, and also there, both meanings are joined one to the other. Varum, because there's a commandment from above that you must, therefore it is giving power. This is God is telling us to do it. If God says that we have to do it, then we have the power to do it. God is also promising us, empowering us, inspiring us, and promising us that it will be done. Ahava shows the loving God is the source of all the positive commandments. That this also takes in it all, including the commandment from fearing God, which is the source of all the negative commandments. But all of them, really, loving God is the source of all of the 613 commandments. Because why do you do the commandments? Because you love God. God is good. God is good. And God is so precious and so wonderful. So therefore, you're afraid of doing anything, like people are afraid to go against their grandfather or something like that, because it's they honor them. It is punkt. So therefore, just like love is a commandment and also a promise, there's also all the 613 commandments which are included in this sentence that we started off. Bechukotai means my Torah and my commandments. It's a commandment. You must walk in the statutes, and it is also a promise. You will. All the Jews will. That's the Moshiach is going to bring all the Jews back. That says that the big shofar will sound. All the Jews will come back to their senses and start doing the Torah and the commandments. Nachataych, another explanation is bechukotai. This is learning the Torah. That's one explanation. And another one is referring to the commandments. In the commandments themselves, there's three types of commandments. There are what's called mishpatim, edut, and chukim. There are commandments which are logical. Zayin the mitzvahs, like the 10 commandments, which human intelligence can understand, right? The 10 commandments: don't kill, don't steal, keep society in order. Even if the Torah would not have commanded us to do it, nevertheless, we would know that, there's all these societies, and we're in Africa and the Eskimos and things like that. They never heard of the Torah. They never heard of Judaism, and nevertheless, they have laws that how do you say that keep an orderly society. Can't kill people and steal and rape, do those things. Not That's one type of commandments, are logical commandments. That's called mishpatim. That you could come to the conclusion to do them even if it wasn't in the Torah. Then there's mitzvahs that are called edut. That's testimony. Those are commandments which your mind wouldn't obligate you to do them, but after those commandments are there, so you can understand, right? We eat matzah on Passover. Why? Because the Jews, when they left Egypt, they ate matzah, unleavened bread. We put tefillin on our arm as a sign near our heart and on our head. So it's sort of logical a little bit. We wouldn't have come to the conclusion on our own. If you want to say those are religious commandments, those are commandments that you might not understand on your own, but after they're given, as you can understand, they have some sort of a religious significance and, serving God with your heart, your mind, and remembering going out of Egypt. But then there's a third type of commandments, and those are commandments called chukim. And these are the commandments, velchahab and nitkain or, they have no place, there's not logic. Like, for instance, shatnez, para aduma. Basically, really, all the details of the commandments are chukim, right? Don't turn on a light on Shabbat. Why not? What's the problem? I'm hurting somebody. I'm doing something wrong. What's the wrong with hurting that? Why can't I turn on a light? I want to cook myself up a nice scrambled egg on Shabbat to enjoy the Shabbat. Why not? No, it's for that's a terrible sin. Lighting a fire on Shabbat, turning the light on Shabbat, that's a punishment of death. If there are witnesses and there's all these, like 100 criteria you have to have in order to have a death penalty, but nevertheless, it's a thing God doesn't want. Turning a light on Shabbos, is there something more disgusting? What's wrong with turning on a light on Shabbos? How do you know what day is Shabbos? How do you know a Shabbos is not Monday, Tuesday, Thursday? Scientifically, there's no way you can prove which day it is. All the details are really above understanding. They're not understandable. That was what the Reform and the Conservative, to make Torah logical. What's logical, what's meaningful, let's get away from this, right, illogical stuff. Right? You got to be a human being, let's be human beings. This is, they got a good point, but that's not the Torah. The Torah, there are commandments in the Torah that are intentionally not understandable. Das was the pasuk. That's what the Torah says, bechukotai, and that's what this Torah's portion is talking about. Chukim, those not understandable commandments. It says bechukotai. This means, even though it means all the commandments, you should go on all the commandments, because it says that it's hinted at that also the edut, the religious commandments and the logical commandments, they also, that's commandments that have a place in understanding. Why does it call them all chukim? Because you should do all of the commandments. Why does it call all the commandments bechukotai telecho bechukotai? With my chukim, our commandments don't make any sense. And here it's implying do all the commandments. Why did they call chukim? Because all the commandments should be done in addition to understanding as much as possible. And it's a commandment to try to understand as much as possible. But basically, you do the commandments because God commanded it. Punkt wieder kiyum from chukim, just like chukim, just like the decrees from Torah. And really, let's take the most logical commandment of all: don't kill. That's pretty logical. I mean, don't kill. Right? You don't need God to command us that, right? You can come to your own conclusion, right? Says, well, you had just like 70 years ago, a little more, the most intelligent, sophisticated, cultured, logical society in maybe the history of the world, the Germans. And they made they were experts at murder. They were geniuses at killing people. They were talented, gifted at making weapons of destruction, and they sunk themselves into with great gusto and they're killing people. So here we have you can see that if you don't have the commandments and you say that the commandments come from God, that He's the creator, then anything goes, everything goes, right? And the communists were worse. The communists that they did in Russia, he killed his own people, Stalin. And Mao Zedong, they say he killed even more. Okay, so you say Mao Zedong, maybe they didn't know about the Torah over there, but the communists, so communism was you get rid of God, Boga Niet, there's no God, right? We can do it on our own. And he killed millions of people, tens of millions of people. From just like the Chukim, Hitler, by the way, when he was killing people and just massacring all over, the Pope agreed with him 100%. The Pope supported him, maybe in public, he said, making certain statements, but the Pope was with him on, especially in his murder of the Jews, 100%. What's the problem? If you don't do the commandments because God commanded it, then you can twist everything around, even the logical commandments. Is nit mitzad seichel, because when you do the commandments, it can't be just because of logic, only because of what's called kabbalat ol, accepting the yoke of God. God told me I'll do it. So best vegan, nevertheless, is in them the tainuk, there's a pleasure. How can you get pleasure from doing just something that's just a cold, dry commandment? Says the Rebbe exactly the opposite. Who is the commander here? The commander is the source of all life. Their tainuk, the pleasure, is even greater. Vias is bavus, like it's known, vegan dem inyan from avodat eved neman, or of eved pashut. A faithful servant and a simple servant, as the tainug from Eved is the tainug Adam. A servant, if he's the servant of a true master, that he's a genius and his master is a genius and his master is kind and his master is this, so he gets a tremendous pleasure from doing anything that the master tells him to. So that's the greatest pleasure of all. Was thus is you're connecting yourself to something which is higher and better and more real and more loving than yourself, the source of life. Was thus is marumas, this is hinted at in the word telechu. That's what it means in my chukim, you should go. As chach as is bechukotai, that even though you are in my chukim are laws that don't make any sense, it's called kabbalat ol, doing the commandments, like accepting the yoke, like you put a yoke on an ox. The ox doesn't understand the driver, nothing whatsoever, but he pulls the driver with him, and he gets to a place where the driver wants. The same thing when a Jew does the commandments, and he does it because his driver is God, and he doesn't understand the driver at all. But that's called accepting the yoke. As for desvig, and nevertheless, telechu, the person will be moving. This is the true thing of moving. And the rocks don't move. Plants move, but a little bit, right? Animals, they move physically, but intellectually, with the soul, a soul of an animal doesn't move. A human being can move, especially a Jew. He can become godly. That's when do you become godly? If you do the commandments, because that's what God said. Can es nit kommen zu from Penimius dika und begrenzt to kochos. If a person, going without any moving yourself, becoming something that's unlimited is impossible if you use your own talents and abilities and intelligence. Not only if there has to be what's called the power of pleasure, the essence of the soul is given over to the Creator, and we're doing exactly what the Creator wants. That's the commandments. And that you can't understand it doesn't mean that you become an idiot. It means no, you're now doing things which are above your understanding. It's above all human understanding. You're connecting the creation to the Creator. That's what it means. God is begging us, please do the commandments, and it is also a promise that you will promise from God. It's not talking about actually doing the commandments, but it's talking about the way that you do the commandments. The way that you do the commandments should be b'chukotai, a way which is above understanding. You're connecting yourself to the master of all being, God. As yeder yid, that every single Jew is promised as their vet mekayim, that he will do the commandments with a chayus, with life, enthusiasm, warmness of kabbalat ol, of accepting the yoke, being attached to something which is totally above any comprehension, as we will learn more, God willing, tomorrow. Thank you very much. God bless you. Have a good day. See you tomorrow at 8:15 in the morning.